Hello. Oh, dearie me. It's 7:15. I have showed up. It's a Tuesday, the 10th of October. Oh, maybe another bit of light here, huh? Um, I'm annoyed with myself. I got very little done today in terms of productivity. And I am, now listen carefully to what I say, I'm a chronic procrastinator. I really am. And it's gone beyond the joke now. So much of a procrastinator am I that I did not get a chance to pre-read the chapter we're about to do now of Ideas Have Legs, which is chapter 21. So we are really on the home stretch, because I think in total there's 23. Okay. Oh yeah, look. That's about all that's to go. I might even finish this tomorrow. We'll see. Chapter 21, How to Get It. Don't we all want to know how to get it? Whatever it is, I wish that you'll get it. I wish well on you. I wish that you will get what you want. That's what I'm saying. Hello to Peggy, by the way. Hi, Peggy. Peggy Sue got married. Peggy in Montana, who has been paddling her own canoe. My brother was quite a glamorous guy. He was an airline pilot for years, like the big Airbus, like 830 or whatever it is, for Emirates. He was flying them. And he retired a few years ago. You have to guess what age I am. So he was at retirement age some years ago. And he retired to Vietnam. He'd lived all over, but he'd lived in what's that fancy place? Dubai. But he retired to Vietnam. And Peggy, every morning, he's got a river outside his house. He lives there with his partner. And every morning, he paddles his canoe. And also goes off on his motorbike. And he gets surrounded by monkeys sometimes. Just saying. Keeps asking me to come over. Come over to Vietnam. Come over to Vietnam. Maybe I will. Maybe I will. Chapter 21, How to Get It. How to get in touch with the super force, the super passion, the super wisdom of a new spirit and make it real in our own lives. That is the question we may ask. It takes me back to that luncheon in the temple where I first made contact with its dynamic power myself. At that time, tea was called for. At that time, talk about God was to me just a bore. I felt freer and easier without it. The most amusing and intelligent people I knew were not interested in it. Most of them had no belief in God, nor had I. So, proud and gay, gay meant a completely different thing back in 1945. You do know that, don't you? So proud and gay, not that he shouldn't be proud and gay, just saying. So proud and gay, I strode forward to meet the adventure of my life. The earth was my goblet, and I planned to drain it dry. That day at luncheon in the temple, my neighbour told me he believed in God. I told him I did not. He asked me, why not? For some reason, I found it difficult. Brackets. I so slick of the tongue that I could hold my own with cabinet ministers. To provide a cogent answer to that simple inquiry, I swallowed a mouthful of food to take time for reflection. Then I said to him, well, why do you believe in him? The man replied, it is as foolish to argue about whether there is a God as it is to stand looking at an electric light switch and arguing whether if you turn the light will go on. If you turn it, the light will go on. One fellow says it will, the other fellow says it will not. The end of the argument is to turn the switch and see. I asked this man what he meant. He told me that the way to see whether there was a God was to put him to the proof. He declared that God would talk to each person who was ready to listen and obey. I said this sounded far-fetched to me, but as I looked at this man, I knew he believed what he told me. He was living at a swifter pace than I, and he had in his eyes a peace I longed for, but never had grasped. When I told him again that I did not believe in God, he smiled and said, "In that case, you won't mind listening to him, will you? For you won't expect to hear anything anyway." He suggested to me that, as an experiment, I should take 4 separate sheets of paper. Listen carefully if I recall, this is quite good. I should take 4 separate sheets of paper, then write at the head of each sheet one of the 4 absolute standards Christ preached in his Sermon on the Mount: absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. And that I should ask God to show me where I felt short of them, and to write down, holding nothing back, the thoughts God gave me about myself on each of these 4 standards. You may think the thoughts God gives you are ordinary thoughts, he said to me, but be honest about them. And he told me the story of the countryman. This old fellow, it seems, had a conscience that troubled him. At last he went to a farmer and said, "Master, I'm sorry, I stole a rope from you a while back." His master forgave him, and the countryman went away, but he still had no peace of mind, for he had not told the farmer that there was a cow at the end of the rope when he stole it. I was living in my club in Northumberland Avenue at the time. Next morning, in a cynical spirit, curious but without belief, I sat up in the bed and made the experiment the man suggested. Do you remember the tale of the small errand boy who stood outside the tradesman's entrance? On it was a notice, "Beware of the dog." The small boy said loudly to himself several times, "There ain't nothing there. Garn, I tell you, there ain't nothing there." Then, looking cheerful and cocky, he walked through the door, but he lost the seat of his breeches just the same. I walked through the gate not believing God was there. That did not affect his situation in the slightest. On that morning in my club, God spoke to me, as he speaks to every person who is not too proud to listen to him. At that moment my mind was illuminated. I began to see the truth, the sort of man I was, the sort of man God wanted me to be. Some of the things I wrote I had known deep down in me for a long time, and had taken care to keep them in the depths if they showed signs of coming to the surface. Others I had never suspected. But here is the amazing part of the affair. Some of the things I wrote down that morning on those sheets of paper were habits, both of thought and deed and word, which I had known for a long time were wrong. Yet I enjoyed them. From time to time I had taken a resolution to cut one another of them out of my life, and after a day or so they returned. Now God told me they had to end, and I knew I could not do it. I went to meet the man who had spoken to me at luncheon in the temple. I told him where I stood. He said to me, "God will transform your nature, but only if you let him. If you put right all you can put right, God will put right the rest." He said I must take the simple decision whether I would let God run my life for me or not. He added in matter-of-fact tones that it was like a transfer of property, that if I meant to do it, I had better tell God so on my knees and ask his help. I went back to my little top-story room in Northumberland Avenue. I read again through those 4 sheets of paper with the orders which someone, call him God or what you will, had put into my mind so luminously that morning. I thought to myself, well, try anything once. If it doesn't work out, nobody need know. There's no harm done. Yet, just the same, there was that in me which said that if I did, even in the secrecy of my own club-room, what my friend had suggested, things would never be the same with me again. In that little top-story room in Northumberland Avenue, I got down on my knees, and I prayed something like this: God, or whoever you are, if you are there, I will do what you tell me if you'll give me the strength to do it. But I can't do these things unless you help me. Then I began to act on the instructions and thoughts which were written down on those 4 sheets of paper. I started putting right what I could of the wrongs I had done to others. There was £5 which I had forgotten. Oh, sorry about that, folks. There was £5 which I had forgotten to pay to the fellow who used to rub me down before varsity matches at Oxford. Gay and proud. There was a much larger sum to restore to the Board of Education, who had partly financed my Oxford career in order that I should become a schoolmaster, which did not subsequently work out. Then there were apologies to Doe, as I have told to my young brother and to people in the office. I had to say to a good many folk what Abraham Lincoln said publicly to one of his generals. You were right. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I saw clearly that only Christ could forgive, but only I could restore. But I knew that if I did not fulfill my side of the contract, I could not expect God to step in and perform the miracle. From that day, habits went out of my life which I had believed were with me until I died. To me, the clinching evidence of God is the fact which I know from my own experience daily and constantly, renewed, that there is a power available from outside ourselves to turn us into the sort of people all of us long to be, to give us a plan for our living beyond the limits of our human ambitions and desires, and to offer us the strength, wisdom, and grace to live that plan. From that moment in that tiny room in my club, when for the first time in my life I decided to give God a chance, if he were there, to talk to me, to be really honest with myself about the things he said to me, my life has been transformed. Do I mean that from that instant I became perfect? Of course not. Far from it. I stumble and grope my way along the thorny, narrow path which is marked by the blood-stained footprints of history. There are plenty of falls and many difficulties. Paul and Bunyan and many others wrote about the journey, charting the road for us ordinary men. But I say this, since I began to listen to God, I have been given a new pace and purpose which puts the difficulties which once loomed so grey and grim in a fresh perspective. It is an exhilarating human experience to be granted a sense of destiny, to be offered a distinctive place in a great and growing army marching under God to remake the world. Yet each of us can have it. Since the day I made a start, I have listened every morning, and many times in every day, and have never known God that silent. This would have amazed me if you had told me about it some years ago. Yet it is simple enough. There is no mystery about it. Throughout history, men and women of every age have experienced the direction of God. Cromwell, Washington, Drake, Livingston, Nightingale. For all of them it was the factor which added colour and courage to life. Abraham Lincoln, who listened to God at a time of crisis and preserved a nation's unity, said, I have so many evidences of God's direction that I cannot doubt this power comes from above. I am satisfied that when the Almighty wants me to do or not to do any particular thing, he finds a way of letting me know it. And we do not need to be great statesmen like Abraham. And we do not need to be great statesmen like Abraham Lincoln before we can accept our share in the leadership of the New World Order. For the ordinary man is the man of the future. It will be the ordinary men and women of many nations, empowered by a new force, a new passion, a new wisdom, who will provide the leadership to remake the world. That is the destiny and tradition of true democracy which blossoms into glory, not under the leadership of towering individuals, but by the direction of inspired teams. A determined minority of ordinary men and women, God-filled nobodies, will turn the tide of history. Tomorrow, chapter 22, Silver Thread. I don't know what you made of that, boys and girls, and sorry I was a bit giddy in it, and I think I was acting like that because I'm still so annoyed with myself as to my lack of productivity today. But I found that bit profound. You know, you write down the four absolutes and you just let God do the rest. And I worked on Christian radio for 7 years. And as far as the management of that radio station were concerned, I wasn't a particularly good example of a Christian. And they eventually sacked me. I got away with murder for years. But that wasn't... I was wrong for them and they were wrong for me. I'm a communicator, a bit of an entertainer. I'm getting on in years now, so a lot of what I had in my mind is not going to happen. And yet I feel, if you want to call it God, I feel a certain serenity. And at times I would sit with those Christians, and they were Christians by the book, if you know what I mean. They were very... I couldn't relate to the Hallelujah, I've been saved brigade, if you know what I mean. They'd probably be very insulted now if they heard me speak like that, but I don't mean it as an insult. I did not feel part of... I think your Christianity or your connection to God is a very, very personal thing. And if you do listen, God is in your head most of the time anyway, telling you right from wrong. So I would try and connect with my listeners in very human ways, outlying very human situations and bits of humour and stuff. And it wasn't preachy enough. It wasn't God-fearing enough. And I knew I was on borrowed time. I mean, I couldn't believe I'd gotten away with 7 years of it. This is the first time I've ever spoken publicly about it. And it's no big deal. I mean, it was a small station and I'm a freaking small broadcaster. It was a Faustian pact. They were getting a pretty good professional from me, despite their views on I wasn't given the message properly. What the fuck am I doing now? I'm just reading all about how to get in touch with God. You see, you can misread people as well. We all have our own paths to follow. Am I preaching to you now? I certainly don't mean to. So I could be considered a heathen by God-fearing folk, but they don't know me and they don't know anybody else. And myself and my wife, we went for a walk there on Sunday, and there was this church, in fact, a very good friend of mine, this was my mentor, can't see him, Joe. Joe was like a father to me. There was 20 years between us. And Joe died of a heart attack at 67 years of age. And I nearly died of one about 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't have the heart attack. I had the bypass. Big quadruple. And I'm good on it. And I should be good on it. Nobody ever knows. And from one end of the day to the other, you could be knocked down by a car. So I don't dwell on it, folks. I'm good, and I'm good to move around and stuff. But Joe, if my Christian-y types had looked at Joe, they would have thought he was some kind of charlatan or whatever. He had more humanity and kindness in his little finger than many the Bible thumper that I know. He lived life, and I think he lived life as God would want him to live it. His funeral was standing room only. That was the church we were in the other day, so it brought it back. He died in 2011. And as a kid, like when I went into sales, I was dying on my arse age 22. Joe was 42 at the time. And I went to leave. It was terribly humiliating to not sell anything, and everybody knew you weren't selling. It's that kind of... You're naked in sales. You're either performing or you're not. And he said to me, keep running for the rest of your life, Marco. Or climb into the car with me and we'll go and do some calls and we'll show you how it's done. And he took me from the bottom of Death Valley to the top of the empire. I'm talking too much, am I? I'm sorry. Goodbye. See you for thing 22. Forget about what I just said. Hopefully you listen to the ideas of legs, comments below, all that good stuff. Love to hear from you. Bye.